on Mondays because you have 2 Mondays off in fall, but you also have 2 Mondays off in summer. So they should do the same thing. Like I have a full Friday next semester, but I don't have a class on Mondays. So that way, at least I don't miss anything, and the students don't miss anything. But I don't know. They don't think about it in summer I don't know for what reason they don't think about it. We always have 2 Mondays off, and I have double classes with those poor guys. They miss both the classes. It's bad for them. And I can't like what? How much can I do? Like how much can I push them, right? Anyway, okay, so we'll do job number 1. This is what I want to do in my simple example in class so that it will be done quickly and finished, and the idea will get into your head. The first job I'm doing is I'm trying to create a counter, a simple counter that counts from 0 to a particular limit -1. So you tell me what the limit is, and my counter will go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 till n-1 and will revert back again to 0. So it's kind of a circular counter. It can be easily extended to a counter that takes a lower limit and an upper limit and counts. It may not be a circular one if you just change a little thing. Why I chose to do this way? Because I want to use my counter today in a clock, in a 24-hour clock. And since a clock, if you kind of think about it, the seconds go from 0 to 59 and they come back to 0, right? It's circular. Similarly for minutes, they go from 0 to 59 and then they come back to 0. And for hours, to make it easy for me, I'll use the 24-hour clock. Again, it goes from 0 to 23 and then comes back to 0. So since I want to create a 24-hour clock today, and I just show the display in 12 hours, which is not tough at all, right? So I'll create a 24-hour internal clock today. Again, I'll stick to hours and minutes. It can be easily extended to add seconds. So if you start right, it's very easy to extend your class, and that you must keep in mind. Again, keep in mind when you're designing your class. If you need to add something, you should be able to do it. So this is called extendability, right? You're extending your class. Or, of course, you should also think in terms of inheritance. I have a class that can have these things, and now I can create specific classes from it. So I have a calculator class, and then you can create a scientific calculator or a statistical calculator or whatever. That takes the minimum operations that are required plus does more on it. So always keep those things in mind. These are features of object-oriented programming that just will be used everywhere you go. Doesn't matter the language you're using, whether it's Java or even whether it's PHP. Even if you're doing web programming, if you have this concept right in your head of how to build classes or how to even just organize, if you're not building classes, but how to organize your code, it always will help you to kind of extend your class or inherit from it. Or, I mean, it's just something that should be done always, irrespective of whether you're using an OOPS or a non-OOPS language. And nowadays, everything is OOPS, right? Everything wants to use an MVC model and use the OOPS language. So you have a model, you have a view, and you have a controller. So if you write them well, if you think out well, you won't make a mistake, okay? So we'll start with a small example, and I have chosen to write a circular counter today because I need it in my clock. And as I told you, if you look at it and I say, okay, I don't have time and I couldn't do it, I usually do it as an in class. I say, here is what I've written, a circular counter, now change it into a normal counter. And then it's just thinking, oh, extra variables that will be needed, some methods that will be need to change, and away you go. Unfortunately, that can't happen now just because of time restrictions with the other section also. Right, so I'll kind of do it, but I'll mention how you can extend it, and I'm sure if you understand it, it will make sense to you. Okay, so let's create a new Java project. So this one is from scratch, and as I said, I'll just avoid my comments today, and I'll fill them up afterwards. So you can name it anything you like. I'm just calling it clock. You can call it 24-hour clock, or whatever you like. Oops. So these things, you know how to do. There's nothing on the next page. Okay, so let's try to create a project in it. Oh, sorry, a package in it. And again, the use of packages, one, definitely organization, right? It organizes your work. And two, of course, you're keeping related classes together so that if you're writing an application for a customer, you know it's all here. You compile it, give him or her or your client the jar file, and away it goes. right? You don't have to think about it. So the package is always a good idea. I have been following this convention of naming the name of the college and so on. That's not a rule. Like, I just do it because I find it kind of gives you an idea of the inheritance of how I name a package. Like in Java, java.lang, java.awt.events. So they've kind of given them names that make a little sense. So that's why I do it. You don't have to necessarily do it that way. And then we'll just call it clock. Okay, so we'll start from, so if you don't create a package, what happens? A default package is created by the name of default. Everything is still grouped together, but they don't belong anywhere. You know, they don't belong because they don't belong to a package. There is no relationship that can kind of go together. Putting classes in a package also allows you to use another specifier called protected for your instance variables or methods. You've done private and public, and they're extremes. Private says just in the class, and public says anywhere in the world. So protected kind of comes between it. It has two uses. One, protected means it can be used in the class and in the other classes in the same package. That's one use of protected. And the other use of protected is an inheritance. If you create a variable or a method that is protected, it can be used in the superclass, and it can also be used in the subclasses. So that's protected specifier. Unfortunately, we haven't used it because we could use it in here. In packages, we could. So if you wanted a variable to be shared amongst different classes for whatever reason, you can make it protected instead of private. So protected has two scopes, you can say. Protected variables can be used inside the same package, plus protected variables or methods can also be used in the superclass or wherever they have been declared and all its subclasses. That's the use of protected. So we could do protected here because we've been doing packages right from day one. Not from day one, from week 2 or 3. Okay, so let's create a class. You can call it anything. I'm sticking to number display. Just because that's what I've called mine, and when my code comes on Blackboard, at least you can kind of relate them, right? So I've called them number display and clock display. So I'll stick to those names. So again, as I said, the class that when I create it, you will see that it is easily extendable. It's right now it's a counter that goes from 0 to limit -1, but you can extend it to go from any lower limit to any upper limit. You may not make it circular if you don't like it, just counts, or make it circular. So my aim was I needed it, and so I went that route. Okay, so you can, as I said, I'll put the comments afterwards, and I'll give you my commented version if I can find it. It is somewhere for sure. Okay, so let's create our instance variables. So what do we need in encounter? So this is a kind of a counter, though I've called it number display because it will be used to display a number, but it works like a counter. Keep that in mind. What are the instance variables you think must go into a counter? How, if I say define a counter, how will you recognize a counter? What does it represent? How do I look is the counter? So if I say create a counter, what comes in your mind? Those are its instance variables, right? Every counter will have a value, a number, right? So it will be either 0, 1 to some value. So that we need that value. Otherwise, how do we see it? What else do we need? The increment is +1. If it was something else, then we would need it. We'll just go +1. Anything else?
Max.
The upper limit, right? Or the max. We need an upper limit. And if it was a general counter that can count from anywhere to anywhere, then we would also require a lower limit, right? So if you kind of think of a counter, you would say, oh, it starts with a lower limit, it goes on till an upper limit. So we need those two instance variables, and it shows a value. Those are the instance variables of a counter. Okay, and that's what I'm going to put down here. Since it's just an integer counter, don't forget your privates. A couple of you forget privates when you declare your instance variables. It's not a rule again. It's not a rule, but it's a convention in Java and a property of object-oriented programming that data must be hidden from the outside world. So if data has to be hidden inside an object, then you have to make it private, right? So don't forget this again. I'm not docking off marks for this in exams or assignments. I say I will, but I don't, but you have to keep these things in mind. So it's not wrong, but there is a better way of doing it. So the better way is make them private. That's data hiding. And that's one of the properties of OOPS. Some people don't agree to it, but that's what it is. Okay, so let's take an int and let's call it value. And this will, just so that you know, I won't put all my comments, but this is the value of the number being represented. Let's call it number counter. That way it will be easy, right? So that's the value. So I definitely will need a get value. Do you need a set value? Now it depends. You'll say, am I allowed to change something from outside? The value must automatically go up by 1, reaches the upper limit, must come back to 0. Where lies the need to change it? But if you kind of think of it logically, even if you are using a counter on a scoring board and the scores have gone up and now you want to revert to 0 or something went wrong and then you have to, oh, no, it was not the right score, it was incremented, it has to go back. Or even in your clock, I mean, your clock may stop sometime, right? Power goes off, all clocks go off. We have to set them again. So we will require a set method just in case that we need to change the time in a clock or change the value of a counter. As long as we take care that the value is a valid value. As long as we do that, we are okay. So we will need a set and a get for your value. The second one that I need for this one is again an int, and it's a limit. I'm calling it limit. Of course, if it was more than 1, we would have gone with a lower limit and an upper limit. This is basically the upper limit of your counter. So your counter will count from 0 to whatever, right? So that's what happens if you don't write comments. So basically this class defines a number counter. You could start with 1. There's nothing which stops you, right? Lower limit can be 1. 0 to a limit minus. I'm calling it limit. Definitely, since I'm starting from 0, it will go from 0 to limit minus 1. That's how we'll take. Again, you could have said, no, if I say limit, you have to count it till there. So it goes from 0 to limit. But like I said, to me, it's just easy. And passing a value of 24 makes more sense in a clock, and 60 makes more sense in a clock rather than 23 and 59. Right? So whenever I say a 24-hour clock, you always think 24. You know that minutes are 60 and seconds are 60. So to keep that in mind, 24, 60, 60, I wrote a counter that goes from 0 to 59, 0 to 23, but you still have to give the values as 24 and 60. So for the convenience of the user and to make it more user friendly, I kind of stuck with that. If not, then I would have said, please input 23 for your hours and 59 for your seconds. That is a little odd for the human brain. So I stuck to that and I changed my counter. And again, as I said, it's extendable. You could make a lower limit and you could make an upper limit, and it will work as long as lower limit is less than upper limit. Or if you want to make a reverse counter, the opposite. So it's extendable, very easily extendable. So the limit is the upper limit of the counter. Again, your class is going to count from 0 to limit minus 1. Okay. Okay, so let's take the constructor. A constructor is always public, has the same name as the name of the class. You know what I could do? I could take help. Okay, now do I need something as a parameter to the constructor? Value, of course, will be initialized to 0. I mean, you always start with 0. If you want to change it, you have the set value method. But otherwise, when you create an object, a number display counter, the counter will always start from 0. But definitely what you need is the limit. Right? Now, some of you think that the name here has to be the same as the name of the instance variable. I don't know why. Maybe because that's what I've been doing. I'm kind of going to change my concept a little here. It's not a concept, just how I write it, right? So just so that you know that the relationship doesn't come by the same name. It comes by what value are you trying to set to which instance variables. So giving them same name doesn't mean, oh, it always has to be assigned to that variable. We just call it that so that we don't have to think of so many names. And 2, it makes more sense. But I just, for today, I think I'm not sure if I did in the auction one, but for today, at least for this small example, I'll keep the names of my local parameters of my parameters, which are local, of course, in a method different from the value names of my instance variables, just for the heck of it, because it's still not getting there. Just because I don't have to do anything to the value, I can initialize it right here itself. But of course, you can call the set value method with the value of 0. It's no big deal. I usually say use the set methods in your constructor to call it. So if you wanted to do that, we would say set value, which I haven't yet written, and we could say set value to 0. Or let's do the other way. Whatever, doesn't make a lot of difference. And 2, we need to set the limit to this rollover limit that you have given. Keep in mind, if you change the value of the value, if you change what's inside the value variable, instance variable, it should be a value between 0 to limit -1. You cannot go beyond it. So that's one check you have to keep in mind. Otherwise, you could throw an exception if you like, or you could say, no, nothing doing, I'll put it back to a 0 value. You can decide, or whatever, we can decide whatever we want to do. That's one thing that you have to keep in mind in values. For rollover limit, you've created a counter, say, from 0 to 20. And at this point of time, the value is 15. And now you want to change your rollover limit back to 10. Keep in mind, when you change your limit from something to a different value, the value of the counter may not be the right one. So you will have to reset it. You can reset it to 0 if you like, or you can say if it is in its proper range, it is still okay, leave it where it is or change it back to 0. So you have to keep these things in mind when you set your values and you set your limits. Right? Keep those things in mind. So cannot go less than 0. It cannot go more than limit -1, your value. That's what my counter is doing. And similarly, your limit, anytime you change it, see that does it have an effect on the value? Is the value still valid? Same as what you did with your products, right? You had a quantity, you had a reorder level, and you had a maximum quantity. Anytime you change the maximum quantity, you saw, did it in any way affect the relationship it needs to have with the quantity or with the reorder level? Otherwise, you threw an exception. Same thing here. The value can only lie between 0 to limit -1. So if you change the limit, it will affect value. So it's check, has it affected the value? Maybe put it back to 0 to be on the safe side always, or maybe to a neutral state always, instead of saying safe side, to a neutral state. Or if it is what it is okay, leave it where it is. You can decide. Again, it will depend upon what do you want to do. And why I'm saying this, because not every time in a clock you change both the minutes and the hours. You leave the minutes alone and you change the hours. You know what I mean? So you just have to see, do I need to do and what do I need to do if I want to do something? Okay. Now, if it was a counter, throwing an exception was one thing. Like throwing an exception means I can do anything, is what a throw an exception is. But giving it a default value means, okay, it's okay that you made a mistake, but let's start from 0. So do I need to give it a default value? Is it a valid default value? Do I need to throw an exception? What will work better for my method? Everything you have to decide in a real life situation, right? It's not always the best solution that we can create theoretically. We still are working only theoretically. Okay, so those are the two methods that I will need. Let's kind of create our setters and getters, and I'll just do it through here. So we'll say generate getters and setters for both limit and value. So at least we'll have something to go ahead with. Right, as I said, I'll fill up the comments afterwards just so that we can save some time. Okay, so the get value is no big deal at all. It is a simple method. All it does is return you the value, and that's fine. I will add something to this class. I'll always return my value also as a 2-digit number, because in clocks, you will notice if it is, say, 9:05, you always see a 9 and you see a 05 in the minutes. You never see only a 5 in the minutes. So whenever I will return the value, I'll have the normal get value method, but I'll also have a method like get display value. So if it's a single-digit number, it will put a 0 in front of it. Again, why? Because in a clock, you never see single-digit numbers. Okay, so if you need some extra methods, sure, go ahead. We will keep the get value as such. I will add a get display value afterwards. The get limit also will require no change, but what the change will be required will be in the set value. So again, if you want to call this parameter something else just for the heck of it, as I said, I will today. Just so that you know it can be different. I know I've been calling it the same because I don't want to think of new names. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so now let's see when we want. You can throw an exception if you like and create your own exception class, or you can set it to a default value, whatever works. So since throws is something that we've kind of started doing, we'll just do it. It's not necessary. So let's take this. Where were we here? So we'll have to create a my exception class. And again, if something else works, if you think something like illegal argument exception works from the Java class, use it. There's nothing wrong in using it, right? It's a valid name. Illegal argument exception tells you that something is wrong with my argument. So there is no rule which says that you have to create exception classes. If an exception class from the Java library makes sense, kind of works with what you are thinking, use it. Use the illegal argument exception and it will work. I mean, all you have to do is you just have to go and see what constructor does it have, and usually all these exception classes will have a constructor that takes a string and you can use it. Okay, so you don't have to always create your own exception classes. Just when you start doing big applications for your clients, you kind of want to say, this is what I'm calling my exceptions. So we'll kind of stick with our simple one. I'm going okay. And if you like, here itself, you can change your superclass, and instead of saying it's coming from language lang.object, you can say exception here. What it will do is it will extends exception automatically in your class definition. You can do it right here if you know what you're doing. Okay. Notice how it's already said my exception. It says it extends from it. Okay, so the only thing that we've been doing to keep it simple, we create a constructor of the class and we'll take a message so that it's easy to print it out with get message. And then the first statement is always a call to the super constructor, and we'll pass that message to it. So as long as the exception class has a constructor that takes a string, I'll be okay with this class, and I am okay, right? So you have to know how to call the super. Super is the default name of calling the super constructor. Super means the super class after the name extends. In Java, you can only extend from one class. It's a rule. You cannot extend from more than one classes. Okay, so that's inheritance. You can only extend from one class. So if you wanted more than one inheritance levels, just create a hierarchy. That's all you will do. That's how you will handle multiple extensions, right? But otherwise, you can only say extends from one class. Implements is something else, but extends can only be from one class. So that's why simple my exception class. Okay, so let's come back here and let's see what value is valid and what is not valid. So if your replacement value definitely should be greater than 0, right? Or equal is also doing, because that's my initialize, right? So if my replacement, if my replacement value is greater than equal to 0, so again, I'm doing the right thing first and the wrong thing afterwards. Whatever you want to do really doesn't matter. And also, when you're trying to set the limit, when you're trying to set the value, this value should be less than your limit. Less than or equal to? Less than, because we are saying we are going to limit -1. Right? So does that make sense? Logically, the value cannot lie outside the range of 0 and limit -1. Since it cannot lie outside that range, when you set it, when you give it a new value, it has to lie in that range. Okay? So if that is the case, and it would be nice to see indented code. For whatever reason, I'm still not seeing always indentation, and all you have to do is format Control F, I think. And else, again, you don't have, I mean, it depends what we want to do. Do we need an else here? Yes, we will need an else here. In this case, we will. Else, we will throw a new exception. So create a new object right here of your exception. And pass it a valid message. And again, it would be nice if you can show the value why it is invalid. So you can give a message like value of the number counter or something. I don't remember what I've done on Blackboard, really doesn't matter, as long as you get the knack of it. Value of the number counter must lie between. Now, if I was using a lower limit, I would have used a constant here. But since I'm using 0, I'll say this. And instead of, I can format it also. I can put it in a message and format it in a string. And, or I can do a plus here, and get the limit. Get limit minus, no, get limit is the value. Oh, your variable, yep, okay. So get limit is what is get limit returning you. Get limit is only telling me the value of limit. So I'll have to go get limit -1. I know it's a little confusing, but since I need the counter to behave this way, oh, it doesn't like it. What doesn't it like? Maybe it doesn't like when I create something like this. let's see what the error says. Operator minus. Oh, okay. So it got confused with, because minus was coming as a different one. There. The get limit minus 1 has to be put in brackets because it's an expression, right? It will evaluate. Or of course you could have created a message variable string format, and if you wanted to format it, there's not much to format here, so I kind of left it away. I mean, if it is 10, it will show 10. I don't have to specifically say show it in 5 places or whatever, right? It's just an integer. But if you needed to, there was no big deal, you could do it. And here again, look, the message is clear, much clearer than your product ones now. There all we were saying is its value must be less than maximum quantity. But if we say it should be less than, for example, 15, we show the value of the maximum quantity, and also what you're giving right now will also help. You can say invalid value provided and show the value also. You can even do that. All you have to do is just make a bigger message, right? Invalid value and show the value provided must lie between 0 and this. Nothing stops you. Just because it will become too cumbersome in that brackets, you can create a local variable, message, format it or whatever, or even just write it and then give it. Here I just have to make it a little more cumbersome, but it's not a big thing. So you can say something like invalid value and show the value. Here is where it kind of becomes a little cumbersome. So you'll have to close it, you'll have to open it again, you will have to say get value. You'll have to again close it, so that becomes a little untidy. Then say provided. And if you want to keep it in the same line, sure. If you want to put it in a different line, then we can put a percentage, a /n. Oh, that reminds me, just because I've said it. Do you not logically, do you know the difference between %n and /n? Like there is a difference in their use, in how they are saved. Anybody aware of it?
Percentage can be used with the string format.
And it cannot be the system out println. But there is a difference. There is a use of using the percentage, an advantage of doing it. I read it somewhere when I was, I don't know, looking for something else, and it makes sense, right? Otherwise, why would they have two of them? The /n is, okay, are you aware that the Windows operating system and, for example, the Unix operating system or Linux operating system save their enter keys in two different ways? On Windows, it is saved as a combination of return and line feed. There are two characters. For every enter that you press, the enter key that you press, two characters are saved. Right? A 13 and a 10 if I'm not mistaken. Okay. Whereas on the Unix operating system, it's only one character. When you press the enter key, and it is saved as one character, only the line feed. So here it is line feed and carriage return, and here it is only line feed. Now when you use /n in your code, it is system dependent in the sense that if you're working on Windows, it will behave differently, and if you're working on Linux, it will behave differently. If you use %n, it is system independent. It doesn't matter which operating system you're executing your Java code on, the %n will always convert to next line automatically. So instead, /n is platform dependent and %n is platform independent. So it is recommended that you use %n every.
So %n is 2 characters or 1?
%n is independent in the sense it will automatically go to 2 on Windows and 1 on Linux. You don't have to worry about it. Therefore, it is called platform independent, right? Whereas /n is called platform dependent because you have to, so you can, /n will behave differently on a Windows machine, on a Linux machine. So it is recommended that instead of using /n's, always use %n's anywhere you need to put a /, right? So we cannot use the /n in format. I think it has to do something with the format method. Maybe format method needs to be platform independent. I mean, there is something there. Therefore, we cannot use it. But what should we use it is always a percentage. So I don't remember where I read it, but I did, and it made sense. I said, why would they have to? It's not only you can use it here or here. There has to be a reason. I never thought about it. But it was something I was reading a couple of days back, and I said, oh, now I know why they do it. Anyway, so here it is. Here's the set value. Okay, so the set value says that the valid values are between 0 to get limit, less than get limit, or you can say less than equal to get limit -1. Then you use it. Else you throw an exception, and when you throw an exception, throws my exception in in the signatures of the method, you're only throwing it. That's all you're doing. So this is a rule. When a method throws an exception, you have to add throws exception 1, comma, whatever it throws in the signatures of the method, and then use the throw keyword to throw that exception, to create a new object and throw it. Okay, so that's ready. That's set value. So you have to be careful that it is a valid value.
The get value method is returning.
It's returning a value.
We need to show the replacement.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Thank you. This is the invalid value is the replacement value. I'm so sorry. Definitely. It makes no sense showing that value. I'm so sorry. So this is the invalid value you've provided. You can say invalid value and it will say this value provided. I've left a blank already. Provided, please put a blank here also so that there is space between it. And then say it must lie between this. Oh, sorry, so sorry. It has to, you have to show what the invalid value that was provided. Right? So now it will make complete sense. Invalid value 19 was provided. You can only put a value between 0 and 9. So the message is clear. There is no ambiguity at all. Okay, so keep that in mind. So when I did the product class, because it was your first throwing of exceptions, I kind of kept it simple. At least a different error message would be good. But now you can start improving your error messages. And that's how it should be. Right? You have an error, makes no sense to the user, but you have an error in the email field, makes sense to the user. That's exactly what we are trying to do, user friendly. Okay, so that's the set value. So do you see why it has to be a value between 0 to limit -1? Because that's all my counter counts. So whenever you change it, so why do I need this method? For the simple reason that there could be, and definitely in clocks, there could be a situation where you manually change the value of your hours or your minutes. Okay, so the get limit is simple. The set limit, again, we'll have to do something here also. You'll say it doesn't have a validation. Of course, it should be greater than 0 in my case. But again, if you were writing, if it was a generic one, then it doesn't matter. Maybe you want to create a counter that counts from -10 to -1. Who knows? So there it doesn't matter. But for this situation, for what I'm doing, my limit value has to be greater than 0. And 2, whenever I change the limit, I must check if something has to be done to the value. I have to do that counter check because value depends upon limit. It kind of depends means it can only lie between 0 to limit -1. Okay, so let's check. So we'll do a check again. So again, here if you want to call it rollover limit again, just because we have it. And I am calling it rollover limit because it's rolling over. It's a circular counter. You don't have to call it. You could have called it upper limit. Okay. So for my case, my rollover limit should be greater than 0. So that's my one condition for sure. I have nothing else. But if you needed to extend this class, you will have to check it that it should be greater than lower limit. Instead of just saying greater than 0, maybe your option is greater than 0. Right? So these checks, these extensions to classes can be done very easily. And they are done, like they are done if required here. So if my rollover limit is greater than 0, I'm good to go. There is nothing else I have to do, right? There is no upper limit for me. Like I don't say you could say, oh, you can't give a value of an int which is more than the maximum integer defined in the system. Like if you start thinking of that. But otherwise, like logically for us, if we are just creating a clock, that's 1. But 2, there's another thing I have to do. I have to see that the value doesn't become invalid. So that now here is the option. So anytime you change the limit, do you want to put the value back to 0? That's one option. Or 2, you can do this. You can leave the value where it is if it is okay to leave it, like it is still lying between that range, or you can reset it to 0. So again, this is just entirely what you need to do in the application. I am only doing this because I could show you a ternary operator. That's all. Get the value, and if its value is less than, so we are okay. If it is less than, I mean, you can do it either way. The ternary operator doesn't matter. If it is greater than or equal to get your limit, give me a minute. Again, let's think. Rollover limit is the new value. Oh, you've already set it. Okay, you've already set it. What was I doing? Oh, here also, instead of saying this dot, oh, this is the set limit method. Okay, so if it is greater than, what do I need to do? I have to set it back to 0. Right? I have to set it back to 0. So if it is more than or equal to the limit, I have to set it back to 0, else leave it alone. Leave it alone, wherever it was. Oh, so instead of value, I know this becomes very irritating if you start using get values, get methods. And again, there are two groups who say, no, why should you do it? You're right in the class. And the other group says, no, it makes it easy. I don't know. I've stuck to gets, I'll stick to it. Okay. To me, it doesn't make sense. I mean, either way, I'm not in any of these groups. It's fine by me. But the other group does have a logic saying, why are you kind of calling methods gets so many times and doing an overhead when you're talking to the instance variable in the same class? The set I still can understand. Like, no, sorry, the set I don't understand. The get, maybe you're formatting it or something. Then using get makes sense. But if you have to use it in its raw form, just the value, just its raw form, then we should be allowed to use the instance variable. So I see it this way. If I have to use the raw value, I should be able to use the instance variable. But if I format it and return it, and I need to use that value, then of course I have to use get method. Why will I then write the whole thing again of how to set? So I kind of stick to it because I'm on neither side. Like I say, it's okay. I mean, I'm fine with following whatever norms have to be followed. Okay, so if the value of the get value, so I used get value because that's what I'm doing. If it is greater than or equal to the limit right now, and I've already set it. See, I've set it. Then I'm okay. I'm not okay. I reset it to 0 as I do this. Now, this could have been simply replaced by every time you change the limit, put it back to 0. This is a valid doing it. You are saying, oh, I need a new counter in a sense. You're saying I need a new counter. So every time limit is changed, it's a new counter against that your geometry. And it's a valid assumption. There's nothing wrong in this at all. Right? I don't see anything else in just saying value is equal to 0. Give the value or set value is equal to 0. Whatever method you want. So you can choose either. Like there's nothing wrong in either of them according to me. And so I've said leave the value of the limit alone, leave the value of the value alone, leave whatever it is, if it is still in the range, leave it alone, don't worry about it, let it count. Or, so it could happen, you did it and then you, oh no, I made a mistake and you just want to change the limit, which is okay. But if not, you can also use that, you can also say value is equal to 0 or call set value is 0. I mean, whatever we need to do in our particular application. So again, since there is a set method, you can do this. And you can do this in the constructor also, guys. Instead of calling that assignment statement, I've always said that constructor should, unless it's a final variable and you cannot do it, I would prefer that you write it this way. Just because it's how the norm is done. Why doesn't it like set value?
Throws exception.
Oh, throws an exception. Thank you. I should actually bring my mouse to see and it will tell me, right? Throws my exception. Exactly. That's another thing you have to keep in mind. And some of you did and some of you didn't in your retest. It's not necessary that if I in the Java comments I say it throws my exception when it has to throw it right in the same method. It could be calling a method that is throwing an exception. So in that case also you have to add throws my exception in the signatures. Keep in mind, this method is calling a method. That method says if something invalid happens, I'm going to give back something to you, an exception object. So definitely when this method which is calling gets an exception object, it has to do something with it. It either handles it in a try catch or it just throws it further. So we never handle anything in our classes. We just throw exception. All handling is done in the tester at the main application. There is where the handling is done. So it's easy in the sense of writing methods like this. You don't have to worry about what has to be done. So so you could use this or this, whatever you like. That's my set limit method. What doesn't it like here now? Whenever there is a warning, rollover limit. Thank you. So definitely, even if you see a yellow line, don't ignore it. You may have made some silly mistake which you are not aware of. So I said this limit is equal to limit. It says it was a useless assignment because the limit on the right hand side was also the instance variable. So you're basically saying instance variable assigned to itself. So nothing wrong syntactically. Syntax wise it's fine, but logically it's a useless statement. And that's exactly what it was saying. It said something like redundant code or something like that. Right? So So always look at your warnings also. When you give me something and I see the yellow squiggly line, I still make a point of seeing what is being said, just in case. And you should also. I didn't notice it. Maybe I didn't even think about it because I changed it afterwards. But definitely, now I know the mistake I made. So syntax-wise, it wasn't wrong. Logically, of course, it was useless, right? So it's telling you, the poor guy is giving you hints. Just because I need to see my values in a certain format, I'm going to write a public method that returns a string, and I'm going to call it get display value. So all it will do is it will return you the value in a prettier manner, in a formatted manner. And why am I doing it? Because I have in mind that when I show the time on a 24-hour clock and I have single-digit number, in the hours it still doesn't look odd. In the hours you can still say 3, but if it is 303, this doesn't make sense, right? So what would I like to do? I would like to put a O here. So I didn't do it for hours, but you can. It doesn't matter really. But this is not so much as required as this much is required. So in minutes, I will definitely need to see. So what will I do? I'll return the value of the value variable, instance variable. But before I do it, I'll just convert it into a string. Now there are a couple of ways of converting something into a string. You can concatenate it with a string and it becomes a string. That's easy in Java. Concatenate it with a string and it becomes a string. But two, you can also use your wrapper classes if you've heard of wrapper classes in the first semester. I've mentioned it too in a couple of examples. So every data type, the basic data type has a wrapper class. Int with a capital integer, float with a capital float, D with a capital double, Boolean with also a capital B. And you know what? A couple of you, I think, don't know the difference. And instead of declaring a Boolean variable with a small b, some of you declare it with a capital B. After Java 5, this conversion from basic data type to a wrapper class has been done. It does automatically. You can just work with it. But it wasn't so when Java came into existence. So if you wanted to create a small int variable and put 5 into it, it was valid. Small int I is equal to 5. But if you tried to put a 5 in a capital integer variable, it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. It said I cannot put the 5 into an integer. So you had to basically convert it into wrap it. It's called, therefore they're called wrapper classes. You had to wrap this value 5 into an integer with a capital I. You had to do it. Like do it with code. There was a method called get value or something. I forget now because now we don't bother, right? We don't bother now. But it wasn't possible. You couldn't do it. So now people don't bother about wrapper classes because it doesn't make any difference. So they declare something like a float with a capital F, I've seen in the first example where the salary was a float or a double. And they're using like a normal variable just because there's no difference now. So these are called wrapper classes. And wrapper classes simply had the function because Java, the only place where Java is non-object oriented is its basic data type. So to kind of cover it up, Java introduced this Java wrapper classes and it said, okay, you can convert your int into an integer, a float into a float, a double into a double, and here everything is object oriented. That was the purpose.
With the Boolean one?
There is a capital B Boolean.
So the Boolean wrapper class is an advantage.
I don't think so. I don't see.
Like with the Boolean primitive type, we can have true false.
Yeah.
With the wrapper class, we can have true false and null.
0 and null.
Null.
Oh, okay.
We can return null.
Null in a Boolean. Okay, that's good to know. I was just thinking the other day, what was the advantage of a Boolean? Like int and double, I can, like, I mean, it's okay. It's just a wrapper class. But Boolean, I didn't think of it because somebody used a Boolean in one of the assignments or whatever I was marking. And I said, it still works. So what is the advantage? And I didn't look it up. Good to know. So a method that returns a Boolean value or takes a Boolean value can now take that special value null, right? Because null is a valid value for any object. If you think about it that way, null is a valid value for any object. So that will also happen now in integers and doubles and floats everywhere, logically, right? Since it's now an object, you can also return a null out of it, just because it is an object. And that will happen in all other cases. But yeah, it will also happen in Boolean. Makes sense. It will also happen in Boolean just because they're objects. Okay, so let's get the display value. And what do I need to do in the display value? I'll check the value of the value. So if your value is less than 10, I have to be very specific for 10 because because I need to see if it is a single digit or a number more than one digit. If it is less than this, I can say return. And this is the easy way of doing it, but I need to put a 0 in front of it, and then I want to put get value with it, which is returning an int, and I'm okay. This is absolutely valid. Whenever you concatenate a string with an integer object, it becomes a string. You see it in system out printlns all the time. Or the println says, I need a string from you. So how do you put an integer value in it? You say plus, and you do it. The concatenation operator plus says convert everything into a string. Else you're okay. So now, else you can say return, and this is one way of doing it. Same thing, just for consistency, looking the same. This is one way you can do it. Or definitely you can also say, what was it? String to something, right? Int, or return integer, the wrapper class integer. I think the method is called to string, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Oh, I'm right. Yeah, you can do this also. You can convert an integer value into a string value by the toString method of the integer class. You can do that. It's a static method. You just say integer dot toString, and then of course I have said value. You'll again get a value. I should mention here that whenever you have to use a method more than once, get value more than once, it's always a better idea to put it in a local variable. And you know what? You can even do this. Are you aware of this? I mean, it's not a big deal at all. I'm sure if you see it, you will know it. I can assign it right here too. So it gets assigned, and now you can say add v to it. Once you have it, you can do it. Here it will create a problem because it's only been assigned here. It becomes kind of assignment is, but if happens, if will always happen, right? So it's declared here. This if will always happen. The only thing is assignment has the lowest priority. Oh, it doesn't like it. What is it saying? Type mismatch, cannot convert from bool. Oh, v to a boolean value. Oh, this is not what I wanted to do. Sorry, my brackets are at the wrong place. The assignment operator has the lowest priority. So this is what I want to do first. It's my mistake. There. This is what I want to do. You can do this way also. Though you could have called the get value here also, but this is another way of doing it, which is kind of more neater if you look at it. Now I'm only thinking, since I've put it inside the if, will it complain here? No, it's okay. Because the variable is declared not inside the if. I haven't declared it here, so it's okay to do it. If it's not giving you a syntax error, let's see if when we write the tester, if it does something. Syntactically, it is fine. Syntactically, I can just use v in the if, because it does get assigned, right? When it starts with line number 64, you assign it and then say less than 10. So v does have a value. It does have a value. Otherwise, here it would have said undefined value because local variables do not have a value. So I think it's syntactically it is right. Logically it looks right. I don't know till we test it. So you can do this. So you are kind of, all you're doing is you have an extra variable, but otherwise your code looks neater. Or you could have always done this. You could always have assigned get value right here. That's another way of doing it. I think logically there's nothing wrong in saying that if you're going to use a method more than once, to avoid method calling, same way as you do in a for loop. When we say in a for loop, you say whatever is less than the size of the array list. Instead of putting that in the for loop, put it outside the for loop, get the size, save it in a variable, and then use it in the for loop for efficiency reasons, right? So looking at it from efficiency point of view, though they're so small methods, it's always a good idea to kind of, if you are going to use it, I did use it twice. In if I don't go here, I at least come in the return. So I do call it twice. So if I can avoid it, why not?
We don't even need that.
We
need it for the v.
We need it for the v. I need to change it into a string. I have to because my return type is a string. Yeah.
Actually, we don't need the else.
Oh, you mean the word else? Let's see. Yeah, we don't need the word else. Yeah, because it will return otherwise. Yeah.
But
When you write an if else, it just becomes an if else comes to your mind. So if you're back, oh, you mean
Now the B won't be able to.
now let's see. If it returns, but the if statement always will happen. The line number 64 is always executed.
We can like set the V in the first step.
Yeah, we can. I was just showing you a different way of setting. Yeah. I was just saying you can do it right here also if you feel like it's too much work. Like why write an extra? But to me, it doesn't make a difference. But you can do this also. If the else is not written, the V still has a value, I think. It does. Because line number 64 always happens. And of course, if you want to be sure, you can always do on line number 63.
There's actually a method, decimal formatter. So it returns digit. If it's in the one digit, it automatically puts a zero in front.
Zero in front of it, right.
Otherwise, it returns the two digits.
Ah, okay. Makes sense. That would be better.
We don't need to write the if.
If else, if you're right. What is it called? The class is called decimal formatter?
Yes.
Just, and the method is called?
Like we can like return new decimal formatter. Then in the parentheses we put 00.
Oh, okay. You give the format. Okay, right. And then give the number. Yes, makes sense. Yep, you're right. You can use decimal format. The same thing that we were doing with the one day with the with something that Matthew brought up, right? Same kind of concept. Yeah, makes sense. You can do that. Yeah, and that way also the other thing that kind of improves your understanding of this library. I mean, you're using something that is already available. Why should you do it? So you can definitely do it. So then we don't even have to write. So if you say, so if it is a single digited number, it will automatically put a 0 in front of it. And if it is not, you don't. So you just have to know what the format is, right? So 00 is the format. Yeah, sure. That's not a bad idea at all. Definitely. I think we should go that route. So it's called decimal formatter. I think it's the same class we used for the time also, if I'm not mistaken. Decimal format. Okay. So Java 8 or 9 doesn't matter. Decimal format. It's extending number format. There are the patterns. Yep, there it is. A digit 0. 0 shows as absent. Okay, so we have to use a 00, right?
Actually, throw a comment on your YouTube or the live on the YouTube session.
On the YouTube session?
It will be on YouTube.
Oh, so there is, I'll have to open another window or something, right? Okay. Oh, I am on Chrome.
It's on already. Yes.
Okay.
If you open the video, it's live.
If I open what?
The video which is live right now.
Right now?
Yes.
So how do I open that if something is open already?
You can go to your channel.
Okay. I think no.
Did you click on your name?
On my name? Mm. Oh, this one, maybe my, okay.
No, if you go back, on the left side, the menu, this is your channel up to the video.
Yeah.
Yes.
If I click on it and then say upload defaults, no feature content. What are we trying to look? The definition or something?
The method, how to use it.
Oh, okay. That's what I've opened here on just to see. I think I can make a educated guess. This is what you're saying. You're saying return decimal format.
New.
Oh, yes. Create a new object, new decimal format. And then in double quotes, I think, 00, and then comma or a plus comma?
A dot after the parentheses.
After the parentheses.
Another method, format.
Oh, okay.
Dot format.
Dot format F capital? Is it a class name? No, it's a method name.
It's a dot format.
Oh, not, okay. Not a colon. Let's see, decimal format and the format method. Syntax error, insert, okay.
And then in the parentheses, you give
Value, get value. Let's see. That's all you're saying. It doesn't, oh, something needs to be included. Import decimal form, java.text, okay. Okay, so let's see what it says for a minute. Let's take a string. It's the pattern. Throws a null pointer exception and illegal argument, so we don't have to catch any. Okay, so we are okay here. And what does the format method do? Formats a string. It's a final method, returns a string of a long number. the number to format, and we can give a get value that's an int. Yeah, that will work. That should work, right? So we can put this. Yep, thank you. Perfect, much easier. Much easier, and the other thing is you're seek something that you're using, reuse. I've always said reuse. So it automatically does it, right? So we'll double check. I'm sure it will work. And the 0 was picked up because in the manual we read that if you use 0 and the 0 will be shown as a 0 or will be added or something. If it works, then you don't have to do anything at all. Or of course we can look for something else if it doesn't work. If there is a number format, definitely didn't come into my head at all. Then you don't even have to do all this. All you're saying is format my value as a 0, 0. That means 2 places, and it was returning a string. This method was returning a string. So my return type is also okay. I don't have to do anything about it. So hopefully it will work. Okay, one important method left. I'll give you a break after this. One important method left of your number display. The main method, the increment. Your number is not being incremented at all. So there is one definitely method left, which I think can be made private. What do you say? Because it should not be called from outside the class, right? It is an internal method. So let's call it increment, and its job is what it says, right? So what does it do? It basically, return type is void. All it does is basically increments it up by 1, but you have to be careful. When it reaches the upper limit, it has to go back to 0. So we can use an if we like. Heard of the modulus operator in Java? The remainder operator? Let's try to do this if it makes sense to you. So take your value and assign to it. So I could do an if value is limit, if you have reached limit -1, then you go back to 0, else you only increment by 1. So there is an if, there is a ternary operator also you can replace that. But see if this makes sense to you. It says the new value of the value variable is get the old value. Should I say a +1, or will the ++ operator work? It's a method that is returning an int. I think it will work. I don't see a reason it shouldn't work. Oops, not here. Get the value and increment it, and take the modulus with get limit. I'll explain what I'm doing. Right, I'm just thinking, will this cause okay, I do have a syntax error. What is it saying? Invalid argument. Yeah, it doesn't like it here. Okay, no big deal. I wasn't sure. I thought it was returning an int value, so maybe it will work. Seems like it will not work. The ++ wasn't working with get value. I thought get value is returning an int. I want to implement it. It didn't like it. Okay, so let's see why have I written it, if I've written it correctly, right? So the gets can be replaced by it. Okay, so let's see. Let's take a small counter so that it's easy to do. Let's do 0 to 5. So this is how it will work. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, back to 0, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's what I want to do. So my limit is 5. Right? For my counter, my limit is 5. Okay, I start with 0. What should be my next value be? It should be 1. So get the value of the limit, add 1 to it, and then modulus by 5. Do you know the modulus operator? Remainder. Right? So when you divide 1 by 5, the remainder is 1. Do the same thing. Get the value, add 1 to it. It becomes 2. 2 modulus 5 is 2. So it is 3 and it is 4. And now we are at 4. 4 plus 1 is a 5. 5 modulus 5 is a 0. You're back to 0. So the modulus operator is very handy. And that's what a modulus operator is. If you kind of think of it, if you take modulus of any number by, let's just call it d, then your remainders will always range from 0 to d minus 1. That's what a remainder is, right? You couldn't divide it and there is a remainder. So when you take the modulus of a number and you say modulus d, your remainders will always lie in the range from 0 to d minus 1. And that's what we want, 0 to limit minus 1. So take the modulus from 0. So this is logic. This is just logically saying, if I'm trying to divide by 5, my remainders can only be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. I cannot have any other remainder. Think about it. You divide 0, you divide 1, 6 will give remainder 1, 7 will give 2, 8 will give 3, 9 will give 4, 10 will give 0, and it's back. You can't have a remainder more than 4 when you're trying to divide by 5. Because how can you? Because you said what remains after dividing by 5. So all I've done here is I could have written an if else, but all I've done here is I get the old value. And again, if you really want it to be, here. So if you, what doesn't it like? Okay, void. Unhandled exception. Oops. As soon as I use the set, it says unhandled. And you can always do what? Oh. You can always do this. And that's not a big thing at all. Right? Yes.
Why do we even need the modelers? Like a set method is already programmed to set it to 0, which is more than the limit.
This is the increment method which I'll need to call. I don't want to call the set method.
Set value method.
Set value. What is set value doing? Set value is saying give me a value and I'll replace it.
If we send it the value plus get value plus 1.
Yeah, but what will happen after 4?
Yes, it automatically sets it to 0. It says more if it's more than the limit.
Where have I set it? I've just thrown an exception. If it is a value between 0 and less than limit, I've used it. But otherwise, I have not set it to 0. I've thrown an exception. Okay. So you are setting it to 0?
I'm actually handling the exception first.
Okay, so if you handle the exception first, how will it matter? Oh, you're just saying this value is equal to replacement value. Yeah. Okay, let me think about it. So if you're saying you will be throwing an exception if the value is less than 0 or greater than or equal to limit minus 1. Okay, so if you say now when it becomes equal, it will
set the value to 0. Like if
it will throw an exception.
It will,
in your case, it will throw an exception. You will throw an exception if it is less than 0 or greater than or equal to limit. It will throw an exception. It shouldn't be throwing an exception. It's a counter. You want to count it. The increment method, yeah, no, even yours it won't. It will throw an exception in your case. Because you said greater than equal to 0 is a problem.
But we can
If you are allowed to say get less than get limit, then greater than equal to will throw an exception. So when you say greater than equal to and 4 will become 5 equal and it will throw an exception. And we don't want that, right? We don't want that.
So we can do that.
Like we could, but then we are not going till limit. Remember, then we'll have to kind of change our exception. We'll have to do more work here. This is an easy way, which is just incrementing it and doing it so easily. Like, and that's a generic counter, without even thinking anything, without even thinking of what else is available. Right? It's just a generic way of incrementing a value and bringing it back to zero, which you can use anywhere. If you want to manipulate it in your code, sure, go ahead and do it. But I'm not even thinking what is available. I'm saying it's just a counter. I want to go from 0 to limit minus 1 and come back to 0. So I just use that. And I knew because modulus always gives remainders from 0 to minus 1, this was the best way to do it. You can use an if, then else if you like, if else if you like. You can use a ternary operator if you like. But if you can do it in one line, why would you do more? And efficiently. There's nothing wrong in it, right? Okay, so we'll take a break here. This completes the counter class. If you don't see any red squig, okay, this was just, it was in comments. If you don't see any red squiggly and I see an method increment from the type is never used locally. Yeah, we know it is never used locally. That's fine, right? I haven't used it anywhere. It's saying you haven't used it anywhere. You have a method here which you're not even using. I use gets and I use sets automatically. Constructor it knows will be used. I didn't use it because I don't have to use it. I'll be using it wherever I use the class. Okay, wherever I use the object of the class. Okay, take a break, guys. 15 minutes, come back and try to do 15 minutes and then we'll come back and complete its number display. Okay, let's do this.